Hey everybody, it's Bridget Murphy back again. Sorry for the little hiatus. I'm here with my husband Ray and Damian, and we are here to answer your questions on why your dog doesn't listen once they are outside of the home. So we have 10 common questions that clients ask of, their dog behaves in the house but not outside. So Damian, we're going to start with the first question. People want to know why my dog listens perfectly at home but will ignore me once the moment I step outside.
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of those questions. Um, it's because dogs don't generalize behaviors. And oftentimes when we practice our obedience, we don't practice it around distractions. We don't up the ante. So the dog learns how to sit and down and things like that in low distractions or in a familiar place. But we never take them out and generalize that because dogs don't do that naturally. A dog will learn to sit inside the house, and then they don't understand that they can sit outside the house. So you have to train in all these different locations and especially places that you plan to go to. I always tell everyone practice before you need it. So, if you're working on a heel in your backyard and they're doing great and you want to take your dog on a walk around, downtown, don't take them the day you actually want to go in and relax. You got to go there first and show them that, hey, the rules apply here as well. So the thing I tell people is just dogs don't generalize behavior. So you got to show them how to sit in the house, outside the house, uh, show them how to sit around loud noises, even night and daytime. Sometimes dogs get weird about doing things at night because they've never been trained at night. So it's really important that you train and practice these commands in new places, and you should do that first. Don't assume your dog is going to know how to do those things at this new park. So when you get somewhere new, it should always be work first. Make sure they're paying attention, that they understand that they have to engage with you, and then they can explore.
Can you explain the difference between generalization and proofing? Or are they basically the same thing?
Um, I think I think they could be argued that they're the same thing, but I do think they're slightly different in the sense that like generalizing a behavior is teaching a dog how to do the behavior and generalize that one behavior in different spots, right? Like I can sit in different spots. Proofing it is like making it strong enough to not only do it in the new spot, but be able to do it around that new spot around distractions. So when you proof something, you're really making it bomb proof, right? You're making it so that no matter what happens, they can handle it. But you have to generalize that behavior first and show them that they can do it in that new spot. So I think there's an argument to be made that they are similar enough that you could, maybe interchange them. But I also think there's an argument to be made that generalization is just showing them the behavior in the new place and that they can do it everywhere, and then making them or teaching them to hold that position around really high distractions and proofing it so that they can hold that position, in really hard situations, is the next step after you generalize it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, this is where they rush through things a bit. When a dog starts to get something in a low distraction environment or in one spot, they're anxious to go out there and just do everything everywhere. So you've got low, medium, and high level distraction, which needs to be incrementally introduced to the dog to make sure that they're going to actually do the behavior you want them to do. So we're always teaching them in a low distraction environment, and then we graduate to medium and high. The best example I could think of is like the way we train e-collars and recall. We do it with a long line because that allows us to have that safety backup of knowing the dog is not going to go anywhere, but he'll start to reliably come back with one or two taps of an e-collar, in different proximity to different types of distractions and things that are out there in the world. So if you imagine that times however many behaviors you've taught that dog, I mean, that may take a month or two of diligent work. You're basically on a scavenger hunt to solidify all those behaviors. So, I mean, when you talk to people about that, are they surprised by, I guess, the duration or the amount of effort it takes?
Absolutely, yeah, and especially when I explain to them why balanced dog training and using every tool that we have is an advantage and it's a good thing, is because when I explain to them that if we're reinforcing behavior with only positive reinforcement, even if your dog is food motivated enough, you're talking about thousands of reps. They've done studies, thousands of reps for every command in every environment. When you say that, you can just watch the life drain from them, right? Like it's just too much. But when you explain that with the tools, you can do it in a tenth of the time, 300 to 400 reps, and all of a sudden it starts to become more reasonable. So I do get that a lot, and people really have a hard time understanding that your dog can sit here, great, but it needs to be shown he can sit here, and the amount of reps it takes. So yeah, you definitely people are a little taken aback by how much effort and how many reps it takes to get a dog to reliably do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think sum this up, set your dog up for success. If you're unsure, just go back to the basics, go back to the foundation and move slowly. But you guys were kind of touching on this a little bit. Another question we got was my dog knows how to sit and stay, but why do they pull like crazy when they're on leash? And I thought this was a great one because it kind of talks a little bit about impulse control. What do you think, Damian?
So there's a couple of reasons why I think that you're going to have an issue like that. Number one, it's a whole different command, right? Like your dog being able to sit and down and do certain behaviors is not healing, is not walking in a loose leash, right? So you have to build individual behaviors. Your dog might listen in the house and be able to hold a position, but it still might not know how to walk on a leash. So that's part of it, of course, build the behavior you want, but also, it's just so many more distractions, so many more smells, so many more things to grab their attention. So that's a big part of it. And then, of course, engagement. Like, well, that's another one people forget about. I don't know how many dogs I see when we go, we're doing in-home lessons or something and we go out on our walk and that dog could care less about that person. Once they get outside, inside the house, sure, they're paying attention, they get outside and that person means nothing to them. So that's another big reason too. Like if you want your dog to pay attention, around distractions and to really engage with you, you have to make yourself super valuable. And I think that's something people skip. Like they devalue themselves so quickly that's a big issue. So the dog's like, okay, there's not a lot going on. I can pay attention. It's simple. But then we get outside and they forget who their owner is because they just haven't built engagement. You're not that valuable. So I think that's a combination of not only understanding you have to work in every environment for every command, but also understanding you got to make yourself valuable. Your dog should want to engage with you and check in with you. And if you don't have that, you're just going to be fighting the dog. Sure, you can get them to heel, but it's more of like a compulsion, like you're going to have to do it versus teaching the dog, hey, I'm super valuable. All this wonderful stuff out here is great, but you got to engage with me. So engagement first, and then generalizing behaviors out in new locations. Those are your two keys to getting your dog to be able to walk on a leash and do it reliably.
So how do you get them, another question we get, just to segue off that, I mean, that's a really good one. I mean, how do you get my dog to stop pulling towards every smell, bush, tree when they're on walks?
So for me, it's about telling your dog what to do. So I never it's fine. I want my dog, if my dog wants to smell things, great. I don't ever want to correct a dog's emotions or what they want to do. It's just simply, you got to hold your heel. So the difference is it's not like I'm saying, oh, you're a bad dog because you want to smell things, or that I'm not even going to let you smell. Of course, I'm going to let you smell things eventually. But when I ask you to heel, there are parameters. There are rules to that. And so part of those rules is matching my pace and keeping your head up. So I just think a big part of it is the dog, that people don't reinforce that, but they also they think that the best thing for their dog is just to get to smell and all, do whatever they want. But again, that dog has to earn that. The dog has to show you that, hey, I can engage with you. I can walk with you. I'm not going to pull. I'm not going to react. And then they can start having that. Again, when if I'm walking in a heel and my dog understands the heel and I'm practicing it, if they reach down to smell and I correct them, give them a little tug on the prong or e-collar correction, I'm not correcting them because they want to smell something. I'm saying hold your position. That's it. So I think it's really important for people to understand that. We're not saying your dog can't enjoy the walk. It's just when you've asked them, when you've given that command, you've got to hold them accountable to the parameters. And if you don't do that, then it's going to be a fight. Your dog's going to be dragging you around. It's just going to be a fight the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it really comes down to we always say your dog needs a job. This is your job in this moment. I've asked you to heel. It's like you punched in on the clock. You're now working for me. When I release you from that heel, that's when you can go pee on a bush or go sniff the ground or go greet somebody. But when I say it's time to go back to work and I give you that heel command, you're back on the job.
Yep.
Well, I think people really have to understand, I guess, that importance of the heel command itself. I think a lot of people get confused when, let's just say their dog, the problem behavior that they're reporting is, my dog's counter surfing and he's jumping up on the couch and he's just being a general nuisance at the door. And then the first thing you do is you teach this dog how to heel, and they're kind of asking you, well, I don't really care if he pulls me on leash, but I'm worried about all these other things. Could you explain, I guess, why we sometimes start with a structured walk to kind of rebuild, I guess, the relationship and communication?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's exactly what we do. Number one, that's a huge one to see. I'm like, okay, here's your problem, and you might not understand why we're starting here, but they're all connected. So I think you mentioned it. It's what we're doing with the tools and the obedience and the no free lunch policy, which is a big part of this. So even healing is part of that. If your dog likes to smell and pee on things and do stuff, great. That's a reward. And we want to teach him that he has to earn that, because what that does is create value in your commands. If your dog is gonna get to do all the things you want them to do, or they want to do anyways, why would they listen to you? But if they understand, hey, this is how I get things. So you're already starting a relationship on a structured walk. You're teaching your dog, hey, engage with me. I'm the key to all these things. um, I'm going to mentally stimulate you so your mental endurance grows, so that you can handle stress, pressure, and environmental things. And that way, now that we have a communication set up, that I've, structured walks are probably the best way to do that. You understand the tools, you understand the obedience, you understand the reward system, and now I can take that system we created, a communication system, and apply it to the problems that you have. You can't just solve one problem with a dog. If your dog just pulls on a leash, we got to solve a lot of other things still. So I think it's really important that people understand that it's all connected, and it's really hard to just fix one problem with a dog. You've got to create a communication system. So it's about creating relationship, the no free lunch policy, so that the dog wants to do those things for you, is willing to do those things for you. And the communication system has to be set up. And structured walks are the best, absolute best consistent way to do that. So yeah, healing is always going to be a big part of it, because it allows us to, like you said, teach them how to work. And you nailed it. It's like you punched your time card, you're on the clock. You have a job to do.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think it's important for people to remember, dogs' brains are kind of like spreadsheets, right? That they'll remember. It's everything in their life adds up. And then they learn, well, if I don't have to listen in this scenario, well, maybe I don't have to listen in this scenario. So always remember, everything in your dog's life adds up, and just be consistent with everything that you do with them. We kind of touched on this one question, is my dog being stubborn or just distracted in new places? We covered that one. But this other question I thought was great. How do I get my dog to listen when they are fixated on another dog or person or object? This is a good
Yeah.
one.
Honestly, you can't in that moment unless you break the fixation. That's the thing people have to understand. When we use that word fixation, it's not just curiosity or, it is, I'm locked in on that thing, and my verbal commands mean nothing. I am locked in. In that moment, you can't do anything. You can't work your dog through that unless you break that fixation first. Like, just trying to work them through it is not going to work, because that's, by definition, they are fixated on that thing. But again, I'm more proactive. I don't want to say you're a bad dog for fixating. I'm going to tell you, leave it, which it means whatever you're engaging with, disengage. Again, that's more proactive. And then I'm going to back that up, of course, with the tool. Because in that moment, your words are not going to mean enough. If they're fixated, treats aren't going to mean anything. So you need some way to break the fixation. And if that's a problem you have, mental stimulation, mental exercise is going to be a big part of that. So yes, in that moment, we're going to work on using the tools and our proactive commands, like a leave it command, to break the fixation and then get them back into where we need them to be. But then we're also going to look at the totality of the problem and be like, okay, every time we leave the house, your dog is just lost, even though they can do well inside the house. Okay, your dog's mental endurance isn't where we need it to be. So we need to really challenge them so that they can handle that, right? Like they're unable to process all this stuff, and they're just fixating. So, daily obedience, your structured walks, challenging your dog mentally so that they can handle more will really help with that. But also having a really strong leave it command that you practice in the house, you develop and then take out, making sure you pair it with the tools. And then of course, threshold is a big part of it too. There is a limit early in the training, or even a genetic limit that your dog is never going to be able to overcome at some point. So you have to make sure, okay, my dog's early in the training. I can't be within 10 feet of that dog and be successful. I cannot do it, no matter how well I'm doing in my training. So you also have to understand your dog. We don't run and hide from that, but you've got to, like I think Ray had mentioned earlier, you got to build into it. It takes time to kind of close that gap. So don't, your dog's doing okay. Don't rush it. Take your time, work slowly towards that, and then make sure that if they're fixated, that you're not getting anywhere. So break it, whether it's with a leave it command, with recall them out of it, whatever we're doing. We want to do something proactive. We don't want to just sit there and say you're a bad dog because you're fixated.
So, I mean, this obviously circles back to our use of tools, things like prong collars and e-collars. Could you explain why we typically will use things like prong collars or e-collars to reinforce a leave it command or give a correction when fixation, instead of using things like a head halty or a harness or a flat collar or a choke chain? I mean, there are myriad of other tools out there and gimmicky type things that claim to stop dogs from acting silly on a leash. But when it comes down to it, it seems to be a prong collar or an e-collar seem to have the best results. Could you explain why that might be?
Absolutely. There's a couple of those tools that are absolutely going to make things worse. They're actually going to make the behaviors worse. And anything that activates their opposition reflex. So a flat collar or a harness is going to make whatever problem you're having worse. You're not going to be able to communicate with them effectively. When you put leash pressure on them, you're actually telling them to go the opposite direction. So you just cannot communicate with them in that moment. Now, there's other tools like let's say a head halty. That can prevent a dog sometimes from pulling or even sometimes reacting, but that's all you're doing is preventing it, right? You're not fixing it. You're not working on it. I've seen dogs that don't pull on a head halty, but they're not learning anything. They just physically cannot pull on it. So for me, that's like a Band-Aid, or like you might be able to, get past a few issues, but you're never, one day you're going to run into a situation you can't work past. So with the tools, we can be proactive when we can build behaviors. And so we can, again, instead of just punishing your dog or preventing them from pulling, I can use the tools to teach them how to heal. Again, which is much more fair. Someone had told me, and I love this phrasing, is like, we want to fill the negative space first before we try to break down behavior. So again, you can't teach a dog how to heal with a head halty. You can just possibly prevent them from pulling, and that's just not as effective. So yeah, that's my reason for the tools. I can use them to build behaviors versus using them to just prevent behaviors.
Yeah, I think when they're on, I guess, that fixation escalation path, they're going from 0 to 10, and when they hit 10, they're going bananas at the end of the leash. You as a handler need to catch them at a 3.
Certainly.
And really, the only thing that gets them to do that is either a pop from a prong collar or a little tap from an e-collar, because it's like somebody poking you in the shoulder saying, "Hey,
yeah,
attention to me." And it doesn't allow that path to exceed past, that point of no return when they hit 9 or 10, and then it's on. Then all you're dragging your dog out of the situation. And I think a lot of people don't understand that there's different levels to this. And, it's a little more prevalent with kind of working or bully breeds or pushy dogs, but it could happen to any dog. But I think this is where all that misinformation comes from. People don't understand, but what works for Rusty, the golden retriever, is not going to work for somebody's high drive Malinois. And anywhere in between, there's also exceptions to the rule, but as a whole, that's really what we see out there with all the dogs out there, and the misunderstanding of what these tools actually do, which is just communicate with them and give them clear, parameters on what to do. When your dog is starting to get overloaded or redlining outside, what can you do at that point? Is training over, or do you got to back off, or what do you suggest in those scenarios that you've taken them to somewhere too deep in the woods, I guess?
Yeah.
With distraction, and how do you save that?
Absolutely. So there's a couple things you don't want to do. The major one is like bail, meaning like just pull your dog, let them react, and just drag them away, right? Like some people do, like a lot of people do when they don't have any training. But even if you are training and you're at a point where you're like, oh shoot, I'm in it and I can't be successful, letting your dog like react and just dragging them away is just literally reinforcing all that. Now, working away is something you can do. I've been in situations where I pushed a dog too far and I thought, oh, I think they're ready, but this is not going to happen, right? So I'm going to heel away. Now that might seem like a small little, you could even say it's an argument over what like the words mean, but there's a big difference between dragging your dog away and heeling away, even if it's ugly when you're heeling away, but you are asking for this command and you're backing it up. You're trying to work away. Don't drag your dog away, because all you're doing is teaching them, hey, if I react, I create distance. And that's not what we want to do. So that's a big one there. Another major issue is, I really like this kind of metaphor of, when we say positive and negative, we mean add or subtract when I'm talking about dog training like this. So positive reinforcement or positive punishment, when a dog's cup is full, right? When they're overstimulated, when you add something to something that's full, it overflows. And that can be a positive punishment, meaning like, a decent correction, or even a treat. I've seen treats, they're overstimulated, make a dog kind of tip over. So for me, it's about managing the state of mind and actually removing something. So I use a lot of negative reinforcement, meaning steady pressure until that behavior drops, and then I release it, because I think of it like dumping some of that water out. So for me, adding steady pressure until the dog follows the command and releasing it in those higher states of mind, I get way better results than I do adding like no positive pop or positive correction. So for me, it's about dumping water out of that cup, that full cup. And so use steady pressure. I mean, I've had times where I've had to heal out of a situation and I'm holding the e-collar. And the only thing that's keeping that dog from, like, you know, you can see them struggling. The only thing keeping that dog from going back and reacting is that negative reinforcement, that steady pressure until we're finally clear. Release of pressure says you did the right thing. That's ideally, we don't put ourselves in that situation. So we don't need that kind of like more advanced handling technique to get out of there. But everybody makes mistakes. Even trainers who know what they're doing and do a great job sometimes kind of push a dog too far. So just know you got to work them out of it. And if it's a little ugly that first time, but you're successful, great. That's fine. You know, some people bail because they think, oh, this isn't working perfectly. But what you don't want to do is add to the stimulation. You want to balance their energy, first of all. So if your dog's up here, you need to be zen and relaxed. Even if you're not feeling that way, you need to project that, because that's going to balance your dog out. And then you need to work them away. Steady pressure, release of pressure when they're doing the right thing, and proactive commands. Heal, leave it, recall, not just no, don't do that. Hey, pay attention, be engaged with me. And then reevaluate. What happened? Was I too close? Was it too many dogs? Was it too active of dogs? Whatever the situation was, and adjust and work towards it. One more point I'll make about that is, if your dog is having an issue with something, that's what you need to practice. So if you take them to a park and you think they're ready and they have a meltdown, okay, that's what we need to work on. This dog has trouble around higher distractions. So I'm not going to avoid that. I'm going to readjust my training plan and I'm going to attack that. So I'm going to go to the park when it's not as busy. I'm going to plan, you know, I'm going to go to a park with a trainer friend who has a dog that's non-reactive, and we're going to start working on that actual problem. We're not going to say, oh, let's move past that and ignore it. Let's go at it, you know, but do it appropriately.
I love all of what you just said. And I was smiling a little bit over here because Damian, you've met my dog Cairo. When he was younger, he was the prime example of the dog whose cup was overflowing. So to your point, adding rewards to that dog just sent him to the moon. So really, you know, owners have to get to know their dog, what works for them. This is definitely, like everything in dog training, one size does not fit all, for sure. And like you said, I think a lot of times people beat themselves up. They think, oh my God, I made a mistake. My dog made a mistake. And they get really down. And I would encourage people to look at those moments as huge learning potential opportunities. That is where you will make the best breakthroughs. So don't get down on yourself. This is exactly like Damian was saying, this is where you need to work and spend more time. We've been answering a lot of the questions that we had. Which is great. I think the one that made me laugh is my dog is fine in the yard, but acts like he's never been trained on the sidewalk, which we can kind of touch on that, which we have, but also what to do when a dog doesn't respond to treats. So what do I do when my dog blows off a command, even if I have a treat? Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. And first of all, unless your dog is an absolute food maniac, even very food motivated dogs, there's going to be at some point something in the world that is more valuable than that treat. And if all you're doing is trying to just positively reinforce your dog, you are going to run into a situation, again, unless you have this unicorn, where that's not going to work, right? Where your dog is going to blow off the treat, or maybe the dog takes the treat. I've seen dogs purely fixated that take a treat and all you're doing is rewarding that type of stuff. So there's a time and a place that's gonna fail. And again, that's why I like negative reinforcement. That's why I like using all the quadrants, is because it's an always built in. With the tools, you can always reinforce a behavior if you need to, even if they're not willing to take a treat. So that's what you're right. We have to reinforce behavior. If they're not going to take a treat, then we're going to use negative reinforcement, which is the removal of pressure. So steady prong pressure, dog does what we need, release. Steady e-collar pressure, dog does what they're supposed to, you release the pressure. That's why I love the negative reinforcement. It's always there, no matter what state of mind the dog is in, no matter what situation you're in, no matter whether or not you have treats, no matter if the dog will take the treats, you can reinforce behavior. Or I guess another way of thinking about it is you can effectively communicate with your dog even when they won't take a treat. And so you're limiting yourself if you don't use all the quadrants. If you do not educate yourself on the tools and use them appropriately, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's give it to people. The last question that we had, How long does it really take to get my dog to listen in the real world?
That's a great question. So it really depends on the dog, but I think generally speaking, first of all, we talked about it a little bit, right? 3,000 to 4,000 reps, depending on what you're doing for every command in every environment, 300 to 400 reps, depending on if you're pairing positive and negative reinforcement. So that's a big part of it. It takes a ton of reps. You're just gonna have to practice. That's why it has to be somewhat, especially when they're younger, a bit of a lifestyle. So an example would be threshold manners. Threshold manners is when your dog, sits, holds that sit, engages with you before going through thresholds. There's multiple reasons we do that. Number one, it sets the tone, right? You're going to know immediately if your dog's in like a working mode, or, oh, I need to tighten him up, all that stuff. But it also just lets us get reps. Think about every time you take your dog out, you're going to get a sit in, you're going to get engagement in, you're going to get implied stay in. So you have to find those moments so you can get those reps in. Also, depending on the age of your dog, if you get a puppy, an 8-week-old puppy, even when that dog is a year old, he's still so young. You still have so much more to go. That's another one people forget too when they're younger. It's like, yeah, your dog will pick up the stuff quick, but to actually become, proficient in it and really understand it, and to get the relationship where you want it to be, they're going to be 2 years old before we're at a place where I'm like, all right, now we're where we want to be. So it takes a long time, but it's worth it. The quantity of time you put in now pays off in quality of time later. And in the grand scheme of things, we get these people who rescue dogs, and they, the dog know anything, and they want to really work hard with the dog. And it's like, okay, they're willing to do 4 weeks. Great. It's like, you need 40 weeks. You need a year. You have to be able to commit to that. It gets easier. At first, it seems a little overwhelming. Sure, it can, because you're like, okay, I gotta remember how to use the tools. I gotta make sure I'm doing all this structure. But it gets easier, and eventually, you're just living a very stress-free life with your dog. And it's worth it. Man, is it worth the quantity of time you put in early? It takes a long time, but it is worth it.
That was so beautifully said. I think that was a perfect way to wrap this up. Give your dog the respect and time it deserves, and your relationship, and it will pay off tenfold.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end this really awesome conversation. We talked a lot about engagement and some other topics that we have discussed on other trainer talks. So for those of you out there, please refer back to some of those other trainer talks where we talk about engagement and tools and all that good stuff. Let us know what you want to hear. We are here for you. So you can look us up at KoruK9.com, all the social platforms at KoruK9, and we will be back again very soon. Thanks, gentlemen.